The knife came out fast. 1 second it wasn't there. The next, it was 6 inches of steel catching the dim bar light, pointed directly at Steve McQueen's throat. The bar went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from shock. The kind that comes from everyone knowing, instantly, instinctively, that someone was about to die. The man holding the knife was big, 6'3", maybe 240 pounds, with prison tattoos crawling up his arms, and the kind of eyes that had seen violence and liked it. His breath smelled like whiskey and rage. His hand was steady. This wasn't his first time holding a blade to someone's throat. "Give me your wallet, movie star," he said, voice low and mean. "Or I cut you right here. See if your pretty face gets you work after that." Steve McQueen stood perfectly still. His hands were visible, open, non-threatening. But his eyes were doing something the guy with the knife didn't recognize. They were calculating, measuring, counting, distance to the weapon, angle of attack, possible exits, potential threats, all of it processed in less than a second. Marine Corps training, reform school survival instincts, street fighting knowledge earned the hard way. The bar was called The Rusty Nail. Downtown Los Angeles, spring 1968. The kind of dive where dock workers, mechanics, and people trying to disappear went to drink. Not the kind of place you'd expect to find the biggest movie star in the world. But Steve McQueen wasn't there as a movie star. He was there as a man trying to forget he was one, trying to feel like himself again, like the kid from the streets, like the Marine who'd survived worse than Hollywood politics and studio executives. Behind the thug with the knife, McQueen could see the bartender reaching slowly for something under the bar. Probably a shotgun. Probably about to make this situation much worse. In the corner booth, a young couple, college kids out of place here, were frozen in terror. The girl had her hand over her mouth. The guy looked like he might throw up. And standing near the pool table, swaying drunk and oblivious, was the reason Steve McQueen had walked into this bar in the first place. Jimmy Deacon, stunt coordinator, friend. A guy who'd saved McQueen's life on at least 2 film sets and was now about to lose his own because he was too drunk to know a robbery was happening 5 feet away. "I said, give me the wallet." The knife pressed closer, close enough that Steve could feel the cold metal against his skin. McQueen's voice was calm, flat, the voice he used right before he did something no one expected. "You don't want to do this." The thug laughed. Ugly sound. "Yeah, why's that?" "Because in about 3 seconds I'm going to take that knife away from you. And then you're going to wish you'd stayed home tonight." For just a moment, 1 heartbeat, the thug hesitated. Something in McQueen's voice. Something in his eyes. A warning. But then his ego kicked in. That prison yard pride that wouldn't let him back down. Not from some actor. Not from some Hollywood pretty boy who probably had a stunt double for everything. "You think you're tough because you play tough guys in movies?" The knife pressed harder. "Let's see how tough." He never finished the sentence. What happened next took exactly 2.4 seconds. The police would later ask McQueen to demonstrate it 3 times because they couldn't believe it was possible. Steve's left hand shot up, deflecting the knife away from his throat. His right hand grabbed the thug's wrist, twisting it with brutal efficiency. The knife clattered to the floor. Before the guy even registered what was happening, McQueen's elbow smashed into his face, once, twice, and then his knee came up into the man's solar plexus. The thug dropped like a puppet with cut strings, gasping for air, blood pouring from his broken nose. But Steve didn't stop, because he'd seen what no one else had seen. Behind the bar, another man was moving. Partner, accomplice. This wasn't a random robbery. It was a setup. And the second guy had a gun. If you want to see how Hollywood's toughest actor became a real-life hero in the next 60 seconds, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens next will change everything. 45 minutes earlier, Steve McQueen had been at a dinner party in Beverly Hills. Producers, directors, actors playing their roles. Everyone performing. Everyone fake. He'd lasted 20 minutes before making an excuse about needing to check on something and walking out. He drove aimlessly for a while. The Mustang GT Fastback, his personal car, not the movie one. Windows down. Radio off. Just the sound of the engine and the city. Eventually, he found himself in downtown LA, the part tourists don't see. The part that reminded him of where he came from. His car phone rang. Primitive thing. Barely worked, but the voice on the other end was clear. "Steve? It's Jimmy. I'm at the Rusty Nail. Think I'm in trouble, man. Need you to come get me." Jimmy Deacon, 42 years old. Alcoholic. Divorced twice. Best stunt coordinator in the business, and the closest thing to a real friend McQueen had in Hollywood. A guy who understood what it meant to actually risk your life, not just pretend to. McQueen pulled up to the Rusty Nail 15 minutes later. The neon sign flickered. Half the letters were out. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few beat-up cars and motorcycles. Not his scene anymore. But it used to be. Inside, the bar smelled like cigarettes, spilled beer, and desperation. The kind of place where people went to hide from their lives. Jimmy was in the corner, barely conscious, head down on the table. Some guys at the bar were watching him. Not friendly watching, predatory watching. McQueen walked to Jimmy's booth, helped him sit up. "Come on, man, let's get you home." That's when the big guy approached, the one with the tattoos. With him was another man, shorter, wiry, with a scar running from his ear to his jaw. Both of them moving with purpose. "Your friend owes money," the big one said. "How much?" $2,000, gambling debt. He's got until tonight to pay, or we take it out of him." The big guy smiled. No humor in it. "Or maybe we take it out of you, movie star." Steve looked at Jimmy. "That true?" Jimmy mumbled something incoherent. "Probably true." "He doesn't have $2,000, McQueen said. "Then, we have a problem." "No, you have a problem." Steve's voice dropped, got quiet. "Dangerous. Because I'm taking my friend out of here, and if you try to stop me, I'll put you through that wall." The bar got tense. The bartender's hand moved under the counter. The couple in the corner booth looked at each other, started gathering their things. Even the drunk guys at the bar could feel the shift. The big guy's face darkened. His hand moved to his belt. "You don't know who you're talking to. And you don't know who you're talking to." That's when the knife came out. That's when everything that happened next became inevitable. Steve McQueen disarmed the big guy in 2.4 seconds. But the real threat was the shorter man with the scar, now pulling a .38 revolver from his jacket. The gun came up, aimed at Steve's chest. Distance, maybe 10 feet. At that range, in this enclosed space, he wouldn't miss. Time slowed. Not really. That's what people say in movies. But McQueen's brain accelerated, processing everything at once. The angle of the gun. The man's finger on the trigger. The college kids in the corner, frozen. The bartender shotgun halfway up. Jimmy, still slumped and useless. And one other thing, something most people wouldn't notice. The gunman was standing next to a pool table, and on that pool table was a rack of balls. Steve moved, grabbed the 8-ball, threw it, not at the gunman's head. Too far, too much movement required. At his hand. The hand holding the gun. The ball hit with a crack like a gunshot. The revolver flew from the man's grip, skittered across the floor. Before anyone could react, McQueen was on him. Not with fancy martial arts. With raw, brutal efficiency learned in alleys and reform schools and Marine Corps boot camp. A straight punch to the throat. A knee to the groin. The man went down, choking, gasping for air. The bartender finally got his shotgun up. Racked it. "Everybody freeze!" Steve put his hands up. Breathing hard. Adrenaline surging. The two would-be robbers were on the floor, one bleeding, one still trying to breathe. Jimmy was somehow sleeping through all of it. And the college couple, the guy had his arms around the girl, both of them shaking. "Call the cops," McQueen said to the bartender. "You just Call. The cops. 5 minutes later, sirens. LAPD rolled up, 3 cars, 6 officers. They came in, ready for a bloodbath, and found Steve McQueen standing calmly beside 2 incapacitated men, one with a broken nose and the other with a crushed windpipe that was making it hard to breathe. The lead officer was a sergeant named Halloran, Irish, 50s, tough as nails. He looked at the scene, looked at Steve, looked at the knife and gun on the floor. "Mr. McQueen? Want to tell me what happened here?" Steve did. Short version. The whole bar backed him up. The bartender. The couple. Even some of the guys at the bar who'd been watching it all go down. "These 2 have warrants," another officer said, checking IDs. "Armed robbery, assault. One of them skipped bail 2 months ago." Halloran studied Steve. "You know you probably saved that couple's life? And your friends?" He gestured to Jimmy, now being helped to his feet by paramedics. "These guys were going to rob the whole bar. We've been looking for them for weeks." Steve shrugged. "Just helped some people. That's not what I'd call it." Halloran extended his hand. "That's what I'd call being a hero." McQueen shook it, but his face showed nothing. No pride, no satisfaction, just exhaustion. Like he'd done what needed doing and wanted to go home. The couple approached him before he left. The young man, maybe 23, had tears in his eyes. "Thank you. We were so scared. If you hadn't been here." "Don't think about it," Steve said quietly. "Just go home, hold each other, forget this night." But the girl, blonde, maybe 21, was staring at him with something like awe. "You're really him, Steve McQueen. We just watched Bullet last week." A ghost of a smile crossed Steve's face. "That was just a movie. This was real. Remember the difference." The story hit the papers the next morning. Steve McQueen stops armed robbery, saves lives. The studio publicity department went into overdrive. Interviews. Photo ops. They wanted to turn it into a promotional opportunity. McQueen refused all of it. Told his agent, "I didn't do it for publicity. I'm not talking about it." But word got around Hollywood anyway. The way word always does. And something shifted. The other actors, the ones who'd always been competitive with him, who'd resented his success, they looked at him differently now. Because they understood. Steve McQueen wasn't acting tough. He was tough. The 2 men McQueen put down both went to prison. Armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon. Violations of parole. The big one, name was Curtis Wade, got 15 years. Before he was sentenced, his lawyer asked if he had anything to say. Wade looked at the judge and said, "Yeah, Steve McQueen hits like a freight train, and I'm glad I didn't try harder, because he would have killed me." Sergeant Halloran retired from LAPD 3 years later, kept a photo in his office from that night. Steve McQueen standing beside him, both of them looking at the camera. On the back, Halloran had written, "The night I met a real tough guy." The college couple, David and Susan Martinez, sent McQueen a letter every year on the anniversary. Thank you notes, updates on their lives. They got married 6 months after that night, had 3 kids, named their first son Stephen. In the letter explaining why, Susan wrote, "Because we wanted to remember that courage isn't about never being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are." McQueen kept every letter. Never responded. But he kept them. Jimmy Deacon got sober after that night. Took him 3 tries, 2 rehab stints, and a year of AA meetings. But he did it. And for the rest of his life, whenever anyone asked him about Steve McQueen, and people always asked, he told the same story. "Steve didn't save my life that night because we were friends. He saved me because that's who he was. He saw someone in trouble and he couldn't walk away. Didn't matter if it was smart, didn't matter if it was safe, he just couldn't." And that's the difference between Steve McQueen the actor and Steve McQueen the man. The actor was cool, the man was real. Years later, in 1979, A young film student doing a documentary on McQueen asked him about the bar fight. By then, Steve was sick. The cancer was eating him from the inside. But his memory was sharp. "People think being tough means never backing down," he said, voice rough with chemotherapy. But that's not it. Being tough means knowing when to fight and knowing what you're fighting for. Those guys in that bar? They thought I'd fight them over pride, over ego. But I wasn't fighting for me. I was fighting for Jimmy, for that couple in the corner, for the bartender, for people who couldn't fight back. "Do you regret it?" the student asked. "You could have been killed." McQueen smiled. That famous smile. Tired now, but still real. "I regret a lot of things, but not that. Never that." He paused, looked directly at the camera. "Because here's what I learned in reform school, in the Marines, in every bar fight and street brawl I've ever been in. The moment you decide your safety is more important than someone else's life, you stop being human. You become something else, something I never wanted to be." This story isn't about a bar fight. It's about the choice we all face when we see someone in danger. The choice between staying safe and doing what's right. Between protecting yourself and protecting others. Between being a bystander and being a hero. Steve McQueen didn't wake up that morning planning to stop an armed robbery. He just went to help a friend. But when violence came, when the knife came out, when the gun came up, he didn't freeze. He didn't run. He didn't calculate the risk to his career, his reputation, his life. He just moved. Because that's what real courage looks like. Not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Not invincibility, but the willingness to be vulnerable for someone else. Not seeking glory, but doing what needs to be done because no one else will. The police called him a hero. The papers called him a hero. But Steve McQueen never called himself that. Because heroes don't think about being heroes. They think about the person in danger. The friend who needs help. The stranger who might die if someone doesn't act. That's the secret. That's what separates people who do extraordinary things from people who watch extraordinary things happen. Not strength, not training, not even courage. Just the fundamental inability to walk away when someone needs you. Steve McQueen couldn't walk away. Not from 5 Marines drowning under ice. Not from a drunk friend in a dangerous bar. Not from a young couple about to be robbed and maybe killed. He couldn't walk away because somewhere, deep in that reform school kid who'd been abandoned and beaten and told he was nothing, was an ironclad belief: nobody deserves to be left behind. Not on my watch. That belief made him a star, but it made him a hero first. If this story reminded you that real strength means protecting others, even when it costs you something, that courage is action, not absence of fear, then subscribe. Because every week we're uncovering the moments when legends stopped being celebrities and became something more, something real. Hit that subscribe button. These stories aren't just about Steve McQueen. They're about who we all could be if we decided that someone else's life mattered as much as our own safety.